The January 19th meeting of the Diversity, Racial Equity, and Inclusion Committee will now come to order. Let me mention to everyone that this meeting is being recorded, and as a recorded public meeting, the proceedings of this meeting will be made available for viewing at a later time. So I wanted to again remind folks that this is a recorded meeting, and to please keep that in mind. As our first order of business, we'd like to review and have the minutes of the January 12th meeting to be approved. I'm assuming that everyone had received and reviewed those minutes. Is that correct? I see heads nodding, so I guess that's right. Is there a need for any changes, edits, corrections?
Rachel Donovan let me know that she should have been included on the cultural working group. So I've already made that change to my copy, and pending if anyone else has any other edits, I'll get that corrected version sent out.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other changes, corrections? If not, could I get a motion to approve the minutes of January 12th?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of January 12th, 2021 as amended.
Can I get a second to that motion? Someone second the motion?
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Right. The minutes of the January 12th meeting have been approved. Next, we'd like to welcome Chief James Spinney to our meeting. We're pleased to have you here, Chief, and we're certainly looking forward to your presentation. Before you get started, I just wanted to ask you, get a little on your own background, how long you've been with the police department here in Chelmsford.
Sure, thank you. Let me start off by thanking you all for giving me the opportunity to meet with you. Regrettably, we can't meet in person, but hopefully in the not too distant future, we can. I'd also like to make it a point to thank all of you for your commitment and your dedication, volunteering your time to be part of this committee. We all have busy lives, and you should all be commended for taking the time to be part of this very important committee. So I thank you. A little bit about me. I grew up in town, born and bred in Chelmsford. I went through all the public schools. My father was a 35-year firefighter in town. My mother was highly involved with different civic groups in the community. So I got a firsthand look at really public service growing up in town. I became a police officer back in 1990. I'm in my 31st year now. I've held the rank of patrol officer for about 10 years, sergeant as patrol supervisor for 5. I was a lieutenant, in which I was the shift commander for about 8. I was deputy chief overseeing all department operations for about 1.5 years. And I've been chief for going on 6.5 years, obviously overseeing everything. It's been a pleasure and an honor for me to be chief of police in the town that I grew up in. And it's just been a continuing goal for me to serve this community and make sure this department is as professional and responsible to the people that live, work, and visit here every day. So thanks again for having me.
Thanks so much. I just had one other quick question, and I had heard that your role has been referred to as the strong chief of police, and I didn't know if that had a particular that role has a particular definition.
Well, it does, but I wanted to clear up some confusion. I did have about a 10-minute little overview presentation I thought would be helpful if we start with.
Okay. That's fine.
Okay.
That's fine. If you'd like to do that, I can easily quiet down here and give you the floor.
Okay, thank you. I actually put this together before I got the questions, and it's just a quick overview. It's about a dozen slides on a PowerPoint. It should go very quickly. I just wanted to go over some of our priorities in town, the different initiatives we've worked on for a number of years with outreach and et cetera. And then afterwards, we can go right through the questions one by one. A few of them will be answered, but we can certainly, if the committee wants to, touch on it again, no problem at all. So just bear with me here while I can tap into my presentation. And can you all see that?
Yes, we can.
So this is the police department's mission statement. I'm going to go ahead and read it. We, the Chelmsford Police Department, in partnership with our community, are committed to maintaining the peace, protecting life and property, and providing professional law enforcement and crime prevention services. We accept the challenge of reducing the fear of crime by the prevention of criminal activity. We shall provide these services with compassion, dignity, and proficiency within the framework of the United States Constitution. To enhance the quality of life for all citizens, we will cooperate with other agencies and groups to resolve community concerns. To fulfill our mission, the Chelmsford Police Department will provide a supportive work environment that fosters the professional development of its members. Service will be our commitment, honor integrity, our mandate. So that's our mission statement, which we hold very dear. Next, I hope you can make it out, but to the left, this is the doorway to our roll call room. Every officer that comes into work before this shift, they walk through this doorway. And above this doorway is a plaque. And on this plaque is our code of ethics. And this is extremely important to us. That's why it's mounted there. It's been there ever since this facility was built back in 2004. This is what that plaque reads. On my honor, I will never betray my badge, my integrity, my character, or the public's trust. I will always have the courage to hold myself and others accountable. For our actions, I will always uphold the Constitution and the community I serve. This next slide is our overview of our police department operational priorities. I have it broken down into 5 categories. First one is the reduction of crime and the fear of crime. That's through proactive patrol operations and thorough follow-up investigation. Next, we're going to continue our community policing initiatives. We address quality of life issues and concerns and problem-oriented policing strategies. Our school safety programs through our school resource officer program and extensive local and regional safety training regarding the safety of our schools. Our community wellness, focusing on mental health issues, substance abuse disorder issues, with the help of our clinician outreach program, and our diversity issues. We established a diversity committee this summer within the police department. And finally, traffic and safety concerns, which is one of the biggest concerns in our community. So where tonight is about diversity, I'm going to focus on our community wellness and diversity. This is our diversity statement that we created this summer. At the Chelmsford Police Department, we embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion. These concepts are not only about equal opportunity and fair treatment, they are the cornerstone of our mission to practice inclusive community policing that is accessible and accountable to all members of our community. It is our goal to work together as a community to give everyone a voice and to collaborate and co-produce programs and initiatives that improve public safety in a just and effective way. In furtherance of this goal, we are continually analyzing our training, planning, and operations to ensure that we incorporate these important concepts into all that we do. We are only at our best when everyone in our community feels welcome and safe. Our approach for achieving these goals are in 3 ways: through officer training, community outreach initiatives, and operational modifications to policies and procedures. First, I'm going to start out with the training we've been doing. It's important to note we've been doing these trainings for a number of years, and these trainings are in addition to all of our other first responder trainings, our tactical trainings. These are very, very important, and we've been doing them now, I want to say 3 or 4 years. I'm going to go through these next slides rather quick. If anyone needs me to circle back on anything, please let me know. But this is a list of the trainings we do almost on an annual basis now. Implicit bias training, fair and impartial policing and procedural justice, de-escalation training, crisis intervention training. This is a 40-hour course, and our goal is to have every patrol officer attend it. Every year, we're trying to send at least a half a dozen or more officers to it. It's a very comprehensive course, and it's tough to get in, but that's our goal. Interactions with persons suffering from mental health issues and emotional distress. Interactions with persons suffering from substance abuse disorders. Interactions with persons with special needs like autism and dementia. interacting with the LGBTQ community, and relationship building, and police interactions with youth. Again, this is an ongoing training cycle. Most of these, the officers are required to take annually. Now I'm going to move on to our outreach initiatives. These are the programs that the police department engages in addition to the 36,000 calls we handle every year in this community. The first one is kind of our crown jewel. It's our Police Athletic League, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. There are police athletic leagues all across New England in this country, but I feel very confident in saying Chelmsford is one of the largest and finest run police athletic leagues that I've ever seen. And that is because of the dedication and the volunteering of the officers that participate with this program. I have dozens of officers that participate in this, volunteering their time to commit themselves to this program. And it's a huge program with what it gives back to the community. The PAL program donates over $50,000 a year back to Chelmsford. And this donations come in the form of financial assistance, food assistance, heating oil, gas assistance. PAL donates a $10,000 scholarship every year to a Chelmsford High School senior. It's the largest scholarship awarded in town. Other things PAL does that are probably more well known is flag football with the youth, floor hockey, the family movie night. That attracts thousands of people prior to the pandemic. That movie night was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And it wasn't just for Chelmsford kids and families. It was for the whole region. We had families from Merrimack Valley attending the movie night, all free. The movie, food, snacks, drinks, all free. Bicycle safety events, donation of bike helmets, donation of bikes. We've donated bikes to kids that have had their bikes stolen or damaged by vandalism. PAL has shown up, given kids free bicycles, as well as donation of presents to kids in need around the holidays. Additional outreach initiatives include participating in Special Olympic events across the state. CPD participates in COPS for kids with cancer. CPD participates in breast cancer awareness. Every year, obviously right around Christmas at Walmart, we do a huge Toys for Tots drive where we fill up our transport van with gifts for kids. We created a Tip-A-Cop program where officers volunteer and wait tables at local restaurants, and we raise money for various charities. About 5 years ago, we created the Tow Drunk to Drive program, and this is where Christopher's Towing, they're our contracting vendor, and officers will go anywhere in town if someone has overindulged, especially around the holidays, and give them a free ride, no questions asked, to their home to make sure they get home safe, and no charge for the tow. Additional initiatives, we conduct police station tours, obviously prior to the pandemic, but anybody that wanted a tour of the police facility, in most cases it was Boys and Girl Scouts, we do that. Officers participate in Career Day at the high school. We brought resources down to the high school, pictures and pamphlets, and I did one myself to give high schoolers a chance to ask questions about a law enforcement career. We participated in a college intern program. And I'm glad to say that we have had college students that have been part of the BIPOC community come to the police station and participate in that intern program, and it's worked out very well. I have officers that volunteer their time and coach various sports at Chelmsford High School. We have officers that participate in read-ins at the elementary school with the little kids. We participate in the Middlesex Sheriff's Youth Academy. And we work regularly with other town agencies for age-friendly initiatives. Continuing on, we do the birthday party drive-bys. These became especially popular during the pandemic when people could not have traditional birthday parties for their kids, and we've done all ages. I just got a request for a woman that's turning 80, and her daughter thought it would be nice to have a police cruiser lead the procession by this woman's house, and we're going to be glad to do it. We've done the No Shave November. That's where the officers don't shave for the month of November. And we we donate all the money raised to a charity. And a couple of years ago, Chelmsford was in the top 5 in the entire state for the money that we earned. And I believe it went to Wounded Warriors. We provide security assessment and training at local businesses and places of worship. So what that program is, we've reached out to almost every church or place of worship in Chelmsford, and we have put together a safety program for the leaders of that particular location and help them put together safety plans, a safety committee, and we've helped them do that, and that's worked out very well. We are doing more and more on our social media platforms. Obviously, we have Twitter and Facebook, but just about 2 months ago, we started a Tips 411 program, and that's where people can send messages anonymously to the police department, no questions asked, ranging from anything, from a parking problem all the way to a serious crime. We continue to build and improve on our clinician response program. I know that's one of the questions we'll be talking about later, but Chelmsford is one of 5 communities. We share 2 full-time clinicians, and we're building on that program every year with the goal of more and more real-time response to people in crisis. So the goal of all these programs and initiatives is to interact with members of our community and beyond, create long-lasting positive partnerships, and help keep our town and region a great place to be a part of. And then finally, the last prong was operational modifications we've made to our policies and procedures. So this summer, we did a review of our use of force policies, and although we never trained in chokeholds, we've never done chokeholds to my knowledge, we affirmatively put in our policy, chokeholds are forbidden. The same thing with duty to intervene. Our code of ethics has always required an officer to intervene. As far as I'm concerned, that's an unsaid mandate. But because of what had happened and the conversations around it, we inserted that language into our use of force policy as well. Same thing with de-escalation. We've trained in de-escalation for years, but we inserted that in our policy as well. It's also important to note that with the passage of the new police reform law, all those provisions are in the new law statewide. But I thought it was important to note that we actually were ahead of it and had them in there. We established a wellness division within the police department, a division solely dedicated to the community's mental health, substance abuse, and diversity issues, and that's headed up by a lieutenant. We are increasing the deployment of our medical clinician. Like I said, we are trying to get real-time response, whether it's in person, over the phone, or a video type of feed via a tablet. The goal is when the people are having a mental health crisis is to have that clinician there as much as possible. So that's something we're going to continue to work on and improve. And we've established a diversity committee within the police department. And what we've done there is we have about 6 officers that are part of this committee from a wide range of backgrounds. And they're going to help us move forward, reviewing different incidents, what worked, what didn't. And that's a fledgling committee for us, but it's something moving forward that's going to become a permanent part of how we operate. So moving forward, the Chelmsford Police Department will continue to prioritize empathy, respect, and diversity and inclusion with all that we do. The dedicated women and men of the Chelmsford Police Department look forward to working with all entities to help keep our community a great place to live, work, and visit. So with that, let me just make sure I... Okay. So that was the presentation. I'll circle back on any questions you have regarding that, or we can jump right into your questions, whatever you'd like to do, Mr. Chairman.
Great, yeah, thanks very much, Chief. That was, quite helpful to see all that. Definitely, we were, happy to see that the department has a diversity committee now. So that will certainly have an opportunity for us to, work directly with you as it relates to that. With regards to our moving forward with the questions, it sounds like we prefer to just read through our list as we have it. So if we want to move forward and do that, I believe, Latasha, I think you have some of the first list of questions. Am I reading that correctly?
Yes. Thank you, Chief Spinney, for your presentation. If everyone could just give him a round of applause.
Thank you.
That was so informative. I
Thank
learned
you.
quite a bit about your department through that. So I have a few more questions about your department, but one thing I wanted to state is if anyone else on the call has a question, if you could just put it in the chat, then at some point I will go through the chat and look at the questions and see if we can ask it tonight or perhaps send it to the chief and have them answer it at a later time. But to get back to the chief, I'd like to know a little bit about your current demographics of the police department. What is the percentage of officers that actually live in the Merrimack Valley?
Yeah, so that whole list of questions, I think it was A through D, I kind of incorporated into really one answer. Basically, almost the majority of the police department lives in Chelmsford. Those that don't live 1 or 2 communities away. We're all within about 20 minutes of town. Chelmsford is a large enough department where they're not required to live in the community. As far as the demographics go, I have 54 sworn officers. That's from myself down to the most junior patrol officer. We have 9 full-time civilian dispatchers. I have about a 15 officer auxiliary department. They're kind of special traffic enforcement officers. I have and a handful of clerical people. And I can tell you that we are represented by, we have representatives of the Asian American community as part of our police department. We have members of the LGBTQ community in the police department. I have a BIPOC individual on our auxiliary police department. We have 5 female officers on the department. That's more or less how I broke that down. I mean, if you want to look at it, it's 9% women. I didn't really do each one by percentage. I thought it would make more sense just to basically explain it that way. I know one of your questions is our goals to try to improve those numbers. And yes, it is, but you have to understand that Chelmsford is a civil service community. We have to operate under the State Human Resource Division. So when we test for new hires, we don't control that exam. We don't create the exam. We don't administer the exam. We don't grade the exam. That exam is given by the state. And when people take the exam, they choose the community they want to work in. And depending on where you live, you have residential preference for that community. So I guess the best way to explain it would be an individual in Chelmsford. If he gets a 70 on the test, he will be in front of anybody that does not live in town, regardless of their score. So if you live in Westford and you get a 90, but you live in Chelmsford and you get a 70, you will be on the top of that list. It's called residential preference, and when the state created this, probably 100 years ago, it was to take the politics out of any type of hiring or promotional, the chance of any type of manipulation. It also was to attract people that live in their community to work in it. So the same thing goes for Lowell. If you live in Lowell, you take the exam, you will be above anybody in Chelmsford. You will get first shot at working in that community. There's also a military preference. If you serve in the military, you would be above someone that did not serve in the military. If you were injured in the military and you're a disabled veteran, you go to the very top of the list. Now, these are rules that I cannot deviate from. In order to bypass an individual, I have to be able to articulate to the Civil Service Commission why I'm going around someone. So it's much more cumbersome to hire someone for a civil service community than it is for, let's say, a community like Tingsboro. Tingsboro is not civil service. So they can create their own test. They can give it whenever they want. They can create their own oral boards, their own questions, their own scoring. And that's the difference. So what we're going to try to do moving forward, we're going to try to do more recruitment on our end when the next entry-level officer exam is given, which is supposed to be this spring. So we're going to try to get out there and really, especially to more diverse communities, and try to get out there and let them know that this test is being given. Because the sad truth is, the people, the BIPOC community in Chelmsford, they're not taking this test. We exhausted the entire list, I want to say a cycle or two ago. We went through every single resident in Chelmsford that took the exam. I reached no one of color. There was no one of color on it. So that's unfortunate. So that's a goal for us to try to get the word out. But the civil service part of it does make it more difficult because we don't control the exam. We can only just try to get the word out on it. And I don't control the parameters as to the priority on the list. So it can be difficult, but we are going to try to at least improve where we can.
Okay, that's fair. I noticed that you forwarded to us your most recent dispatch position, and we shared, I'm sure all of us shared that with people that we knew. So thank you for including us in that communication. My follow-up question to that is, you've mentioned it already about your social worker, mental health professional that you've added to your staff recently. Thank you for that. Is this person full-time, or is this someone that you have to reach out to and hopefully they're available?
So there's going to be 2 of them, and they are full-time, but the problem is this, we share them with 4 other towns because it's a grant. It's a grant from the Greater Lowell Health Alliance and others that allowed us to move in this direction. And this is probably maybe 4 years ago. Again, I think Chelmsford was ahead of the curve on this. We immediately participated in this program before anybody was even really talking about clinicians. So the good news is there's 2. The bad news is we have to share them. So, but what's happening as of late is they're becoming more and more available, whether it's through video feed or on the phone. So even if it's 10 at night, even having a mental health professional talk to someone in crisis over the phone, and we've had this happen. We had a person in crisis in their vehicle that refused to open the car for the officers. They were having the crisis. So everything gets slowed down. There's no rush. We reached out to the clinician, got them on the phone. Clinician was able to talk to this person. Some additional people with some mental health training arrived on scene, and the event was handled without any issues. Ultimately, I would like to see Chelmsford get its own clinician. I hope the town gets to that point, because I think that's what all towns are going to need, quite frankly. So that's the point we're at now. We have 2, and it's 2 people that go between 5 communities: ourselves, Dracut, Tewksbury, Billerica, and Tingsboro.
Fantastic, thank you. You had a slide on the trainings that you offer to your different officers. I think it was slide 7. I think you called it the enhanced officer training. Is this something that is offered to all the police officers? Is it required that they attend these trainings?
So I committed to the One Mind campaign 2 years ago. And that was at one of the chiefs in service, where every chief in the state meets, and they were promoting this program. And I committed Chelmsford to achieve the One Mind campaign, which is 50% of your department would have this training. Now, we just created a wellness division a few months ago, and our goal is 100%. So it's going to take time because of the length of the course and the fact that it fills up so quick. It's limited in its offerings. But we're going to answer your question, every sworn officer here will attend that training. In the meantime, there's been shorter trainings. There's been shorter versions of it, 4-hour block, an 8-hour block, and the officers have been taking that. It's one of the mandates for this year's in-service. But our goal is to have them all go to this 40-hour comprehensive course.
My next question is, does your officers wear body cameras? And if not, is there a plan to implement them at any point?
So right now they don't, but for about 2 years now, we've been researching them. And my goal for calendar year 21 is to at least get a pilot program off the ground where we can have some companies come to us with different devices and get them out in the field to be tried. There are a lot of issues with body cameras. There's expense, there's public records issues, there's privacy issues, and there's you want to make it a collaborative with the patrolman and the site. You want to make this be a team effort. You don't want anything to be jammed down anybody's throat. So it's important that you get the policies right. There's a lot of policies out there with regards to body cameras. And believe me, these cameras will help the officers vast majority of the time, and they'll hurt them. I have no doubt in my mind. All the new officers want them. I think older officers will have a tough transition because it's something different, it's something new. You got to remember to press the button. All the younger officers that have like less than 5 years on, they're chomping at the bit for these. The other issue is public records. You have to remember, anything that's captured on that camera is a public record. And what people don't understand is, unless they rewrite the law, as things stand now, if an officer was to go to your house with that camera and enter your house, your neighbor would have the right to come into the police station the next day and say, I want to see that footage. And that can be embarrassing for people. So I have a problem with that, the way the law exists today. There's no exemption there. There'd only be exemption if there's little kids, things of that nature. But there'd be no exemption if you were in your pajamas and your neighbor wanted to look at that video. I think that people should be able to get the video if they're involved in the incident. If you had an interaction with an officer or someone else and you wanted to see the video, that's totally fine. I just have some issues with other entities seeing that footage of a personal nature. So there's some hurdles there, but a lot of PDs have worked through it. The other problem is, what if someone asks the officer to turn the camera off? These have to be part of a policy that we put together. Because if you turn the camera off, then there's an allegation of something happened. That's not helpful. If you leave the camera on and the person's upset now that they're being recorded, you sometimes can get less cooperation at a call, and you can almost incite the call. So these are all things we have to look at. But the good news is we're moving that way. I think the whole state's going to be moving that way. The whole country's going to be moving that way. I'm almost surprised it didn't become a mandate with the reform law.
Mhm.
I really thought it was gonna. But our hope is that this summer and fall, we're going to at least have some devices as part of a pilot program to get this thing moving. The expense, there is some expense. There's some initial costs upside of $200,000 to get them, because you're talking cloud storage that has to be stored forever. Things, and you want to get a comprehensive system where there's cruiser video and body camera video. The best systems have both, and they talk to each other during the call. So that's what we're looking at, and we're hopeful that'll happen this year, at least with a pilot.
Okay. All righty. I am down to my last two questions. Does your department ever go back and review a case for lessons learned?
Absolutely. So depending on the level, depending on how serious the incident is, it can be a matter of just that shift talks about it, or maybe the sergeant and those two officers talk about it. Something more significant could be the whole department, and we've had it happen. We're the first to admit that maybe something could have been handled better. Something should have been slowed down. What was the rush in doing that so quick? Conversations we have all the time. So when I read a report, if I'm unhappy with something, how it transpired, I'll reach out to that shift commander. We'll have a talk, and that's how it starts. But the shift commanders and the sergeants on the road have been doing a great job with, again, even if it's just the sergeant and that officer, little Q&A. Hey, you probably could have done this better. So to answer your question, yes.
Good. You mentioned that you created a diversity committee over the summer. Thank you for that. Is that diversity committee comprised of only police officers? And if a complaint was made about an officer, would it be that committee that would review it, or is there an independent committee?
No, this committee is really just about strategies moving forward with us improving our services. And right now it's comprised of about 5 patrol officers, a sergeant and the dispatcher. So we're going to try to meet, I think our original goal was quarterly, just to review different calls, maybe what's going on in the environment, to do things a little different. To answer your question on the discipline, so we do not have a neutral review board of complaints. Other than Boston and a few other larger cities, I am not aware of any police departments in our region that have that. I will tell you that we have policies and procedures governing civilian complaints and internal affairs. All civilian complaints are reviewed by myself and the deputy chief. I have a lieutenant that oversees internal affairs for the most serious of incidents. And those policies are followed. And the most important thing on the policies is keeping in touch with the people that come in to make these complaints, giving them regular updates. We have time constraints on how long we have to investigate an incident. I will tell you that we receive very few complaints. In the 6 years I've been chief, we've received 20 civilian complaints. And that's tens of thousands of interactions every year, okay? And of those 20 complaints, the vast majority are lower level complaints. And that's not to say they're not important. What I mean by that is they're not involving unnecessary use of force. They're not involving someone being mistreated because of their race or ethnic background. They, like I said, the vast majority involve the officer yelled at me. I think the officer was too quick with me. His report was inaccurate. He didn't get back to me fast enough. Maybe some rudeness allegations, things of that nature. And those type of complaints are generally handled by lieutenant shift commander level. But anything serious, if there was an allegation of abuse, theft of property, serious violation of a rule or regulation, those would be overseen by our internal affairs division. And I have the final review along with the deputy chief. And then we decide on discipline, whether it's lowest level of counseling, to a reprimand, to a suspension, all the way to termination. Now, let me just further add, the new police reform bill that just passed, that has a built-in post-citizen committee. So that is now going to be standardized across the state. So I have to assume for the most egregious type complaints, that would get to that committee. So you're going to have that level now, a consistent level, in addition to what currently exists.
Thank you. Thank you for answering those. Tricia, you're up next.
Okay. Before I start with my list of questions, I would like to have the chief circle back to Phil's original question, because I think where you left off with Latasha kind of would be beneficial if you at this point could explain to the committee what the strong chief terminology means.
Sure. So that's interesting. That's interesting you guys asked that. It's not really asked very often because it's just kind of an unknown. And quite frankly, it's irrelevant here in Chelmsford. But what it means is there's 2 statutes in the state that refer to the power of the police chief. One is a weak chief statute, one is a strong chief. And it really has to come down to ultimate say in police operations. So as things stand now, I have final say as to how many officers I put on the street, how I deploy those officers, how the patrol sectors are set up, how I arrange things to be investigated. But I got to be honest with you, it's not relevant because we have a strong town manager system. I answer directly to the town manager. He's my boss. So if he was unhappy with something we were doing, and he said to me, Chief, I don't want you to do this. In all reality, could I probably tell him, I don't care, I'm going to do it anyway? But I have a feeling I wouldn't have the 4 stars on my shoulders for very long. We have a built-in checks and balance system. I answer to the town manager answers to the board of selectmen. I think it's old law that's in there. I think it probably affects smaller towns more that perhaps don't have a town manager, where under a weak chief system, the board of selectmen would have more input as to policy and procedure. So I hope that answers the question.
Does it have anything to do with hiring and firing? Is I think how the question came up.
Okay, well, you actually, in most communities, the town manager or the selectman are the appointing authority. In Chelmsford, I am the appointing authority. So that means that I hire, I can terminate, I promote, but again, I need the final permission of the town manager to do that. When I hire someone, I send the town manager a letter or a memo requesting his final approval to make those appointments. So again, I technically have the power, but in the real world of collaboration and teamwork and chain of command, it's a partnership.
Very good. Thank you very much for clarifying that. Is the Chelmsford Police Department part of any law enforcement organizations such as the Northeastern Mass Law Enforcement Council?
So yes, so for people that don't know, we are part of the Northeast Massachusetts Law Enforcement Council. There are 5 councils in the state. There's NEMLIC, there's SEMLIC for Southeast, there's another SEMLIC for Central, and there's a Western LEC, and there's a Metro LEC. And the Metro LEC is not Boston, it's the towns just outside Boston. Boston has its own. So the easiest way to explain what the law enforcement councils are is it's not an independent entity that comes into Chelmsford and helps us when we need it. What it is it's basically a large mutual aid pact between 62 communities, 2 sheriff's departments, okay? So, and there's a website you can check out, right? And I picked up their vision statement right offline. It's basically an entity that coordinates mutual aid to all member towns. So what does that mean for Chelmsford? Yes, there is a SWAT component. Everybody, the first time they hear of them, they think of SWAT. It's true, there is a SWAT unit, okay? And that's for the most serious, hazardous type calls. We do not have our own SWAT team. Now, I have officers that are part of that team. I have 2. It wouldn't make a lot of sense for each department to have their own SWAT unit because there aren't enough incidents within each community to justify that. So what we've done is we've pooled resources to have a team that deploys to a community when necessary. These are highly trained individuals, heavy on negotiation, trained negotiators. So there is a SWAT component, but NEMLIC is so much more to Chelmsford, and I want to go over really what they really mean for this community. The rapid response team. I don't know if you recall last year, we had that tragic incident of that woman missing from North Chelmsford. Okay, she went missing for over a month and she tragically perished, okay? We didn't know what happened to her at first. So I activated the NEMLIC rapid response team. I had 100 police officers in this town for 3 or 4 days, covering every square inch of territory up there. Now, I could never do that. We could never muster that type of manpower. NEMLIC helps coordinate that. They have internal, they call them control chiefs that oversee each team. They bring the command van. They have incident management people that specialize in mapping. A resource we could not do without. That team deploys when we have a lost child, an Alzheimer patient, somebody with dementia. We just had a child about a month or so get lost in the power lines out in the Porter Road. RRT deployed. Again, I couldn't. I typically have a half a dozen officers on the street at any one time. Within an hour, I can have 100. So invaluable resource.
That's great.
Other elements of NEMLIC are the school threat assessment team, providing school counselors if there was a major school incident. The crisis intervention stress team, crisis intervention stress management. They have teams that'll deploy if I have an officer that went to a call and that's bothered them. We've had that happen. Again, trained negotiators that come out. And we use this. This is something we use every year Just for mental health issues alone, the deployment has been unbelievable the last 12 months. But invaluable service, they share our goals. And the most important part about NEMLIC is when it deploys, they answer to me. They fall under the direct command of whatever supervisor is on duty. So regardless of what team was to come out, whether it's one of my sergeants, a lieutenant, my deputy chief, or myself, we control what they do. So it's not a rogue entity that comes into Chelmsford and takes over. Absolutely the opposite. So it's been a great resource for us.
Good. Glad to hear that their goals are aligned with the Chelmsford Police Department goals as well. That's great. Moving on to some health and well-being, care of health and well-being of your officers. How often do your patrol officers have the ability to get mental health checkups, examinations? Is it required?
So they're required to get physicals every year, okay, which we don't get the results. We just make them go. As far as mental health, we have things in place that if someone's in crisis, and we've had this happen, we've had officers reach out. We get them the help they need regardless of what type of time they need to take. We've had officers reach out to other officers. We've had officers reach out to certain supervisors they feel comfortable with. Absolutely no obstacles whatsoever. We have employee assistance programs in Chelmsford that apply to all town employees. They have access to that. They have access to the crisis intervention stress management team at NEMLIC. But the bottom line is we're not so big here where we don't notice when someone's having some difficulty. I can tell. I mean, we're not hundreds of officer department. There's 37 patrolmen. So, and there's 8 sergeants and 7 lieutenants. But when someone's having a tough time, it's noticed pretty quick by their fellow officers. We're a tight-knit group, and the officers really circle around each other, especially if somebody's having a tough time or in crisis. We make sure they get the help they need.
Are they taught to recognize the signs of stress and agitation?
Yes, as a matter of fact, police officers are 1.5 more times likely to take their own life than the general public. More officers killed themselves last year than were killed in the line of duty. So this is something very serious. The numbers are growing. Some of the in-service training right now for this fiscal year includes officer wellness and seeing the signs of suicide. Yes.
Very good. That's great. And I'm glad to hear that it sounds like they're encouraged to come forward and report any issues that they are having with stress and anxiety. That's good to know. So they feel supported and comfortable in doing that.
Absolutely.
All right. That's all the questions I have in this round. Phil, you're up. You've got to unmute.
Yeah, but hold on. I always get that pesky mute button there. Always gets me. I guess I'm in the current event space here. And I know that, Chief, when you were going through your presentation, you did have one slide. I don't recall all of the detail on the slide, but I know it did have listed, the idea of chokeholds. And I think it was some of the updating that you were doing around writing about that sort of thing. And I just wanted to get a sense of what the Chelmsford, police department, what their general kind of position is on chokeholds and the use of excessive force and anything that you could kind of tell us to help us understand how you approach those sorts of issues.
Sure. So we've never trained in chokeholds ever since I was a patrolman here. Never taught. I haven't seen them done. That's not to say they never were, but I'm not aware of it. But we this summer affirmatively put it in the policy now that they can't be executed. They can't be done. They just can't be done. We've been doing de-escalation for years now, but we re-emphasize that. Part of the new police reform bill that just came out articulates a number of de-escalation steps now that are now going to be part of the use of force law, which I believe becomes effective this fall. We have a very stringent use of force policy here in Chelmsford that articulates what level of force you can use with, depending on the type of aggression you're interacting with. And again, even prior to being chief, I cannot recall a complaint coming into this police department that someone was mistreated physically.
Okay, great. That's good to hear. Thank you.
Chief, I have another question. Although we hope this never happens in our community, if one of your officers is involved in a shooting death of an individual, what is the protocol at the scene and of the incident and the days following it, if it were to happen?
So, as tragic as it wasn't a fatality, but like 3 years ago, we had police shootings 2 years in a row in this community. One was a Tingsboro officer that discharged his firearm in Chelmsford after a pursuit because the police officer was being dragged and crushed. And the second one, a year later, involved a domestic violence incident where a subject was threatening to stab his girlfriend, and the officers felt they had to intervene immediately through a partially closed door. Regardless of it being a fatality or not, I have the district attorney take over. So any fatality, we have to turn the investigation over to the Middlesex District Attorney's Office. They come in, state police are assigned. There are state police investigators that are assigned to the Middlesex District Attorney's Office, and they investigate the circumstances around the shooting. If it's a non-fatal weapon discharge type thing, we could investigate it ourselves, but we don't. We have always, past practice, reached out to the district attorney's office and asked them to examine the circumstances which resulted in the discharge of a firearm, because it's so serious. So to answer your question, the officer is placed on administrative leave, which I'm sure you've all heard about before. We conduct our own use of force policy to make sure that our own policies, rules, and regs were adhered to, and the district attorney's office makes sure there's no violation of law. And once that is done, the officer is reinstated.
Thank you.
And I believe I'm up again. And this particular question, actually, we kind of, in general, hear about these things. We're in different communities. The police are indicated to have had requirements to write so many citations, for some sort of a financial kind of goal, if you will, within the department to write so many citations and that sort of thing. And the question is that something that we have to contend with, here in Chelmsford, or what's your take on that particular situation?
Yeah, so absolutely not. I have no control whether an officer writes a warning, gives you a verbal, or does nothing. We encourage the officers to be proactive. We want them to stop cars because motor vehicle enforcement is one of the highest priorities in this community. I firmly believe that when officers are aggressive with motor vehicle law, it deters other crime. But no, there's absolutely no quotas here whatsoever. An officer could write all warnings and not generate one dime of revenue, and they will never hear from me.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Next question is your department collecting data and reviewing data to determine if there's any statistical trends in traffic stops, for example, percentage of citations issued sorted by race, age, gender, sexuality, or disabilities?
So yes, we do. I'm required by policy to review that at least once a year, but in all reality, it's really reviewed regularly by the shift commanders and above. And to prepare for our meeting tonight, I actually ran 3 years of data. So out of approximately 7,000 citations issued over the last 3 years, 63% were to white, 5% to black, 1% to Indian, and this is how it's set up in my computer system. 6% Hispanic, 7% Asian, 3% Middle Eastern, and 15% unknown. And that simply means when the officer wrote the citation, for whatever reason, he or she did not feel comfortable enough to make an assumption. And I think that they're not going to ask. I don't think there's an officer that's going to ask that. I just don't. I wouldn't feel comfortable asking that. We also track arrest and all criminal charges. So whether someone was arrested or charged via a summons, out of 1,535 charges, 922 of them, or 60% white individuals, 171 or 11% black, 4 or 1% Indian, 196 or 13% Hispanic, 67 Asian, 4%, 13 or 1% Middle Eastern, and 162 unknown. So the most important thing with this data is we're not seeing a warped trend with what represents this region. So that's monitored again at the lieutenant level, and I review it at least semi-annually. But by policy, I have to look at it once a year.
Great, thank you very much.
Back to me.
Back to me, huh?
My next question for you has to do with persons under the age of 18. What is the CPD's, I guess, policy on dealing with any interaction with someone who is a youth?
Sure. So as you might remember, a few years ago, the state lowered the age, actually raised the age of juvenile from 17 to 18. It used to be if you were 17, you were treated as an adult legally with the criminal law, and now it's 18. And when they did that, they rewrote a lot of they decriminalized a lot of juvenile offenses, so they wouldn't end up in an arrest, because they want to keep juveniles out of the criminal justice system. So the trend the last few years has all been diversion, and that's what we work on very closely with the district attorney's office. So rather than charge a juvenile with a crime, have them go through the court system, if we come across an individual committing an offense, right, obviously a report is written, and then we seek out advice from the district attorney's office at Lowell District Court, and they work with us to divert the individual or to see if they're a candidate for diversion, depending on the offense, depending on if the victim wants it to go that way. Because if the victim, let's say it's a vandalism, let's say someone smashed out someone's car window. If the victim is adamant about criminal charges, then it's difficult for the district attorney to move with just diversion or restitution. But I think that's rare. I think almost everybody wants to move in a positive direction.
Right.
So that's been our priority now for a couple of years. Really, I can't even tell you the last time we arrested a juvenile. I just ran the stats for calendar year 2020, zero juvenile arrests. Obviously, if something serious happens involving violence, we have to. But I'm happy to say that last year we had zero. So that's going to just probably keep being the trend, because clearly to have someone involved in the court system at a juvenile's age, it can disrupt their whole ability to move forward and be a productive member of society. So that's been the goal, and we've been on board with that.
Good. I had a second part to that question. It was about if you could describe the interaction specifically for a person of color or a person of the LGBT plus community, but you've kind of answered that already in some of your previous responses, so we'll move on from there.
Okay.
The community questions are mine mainly because I believe in unity in the community. It's like a little running joke that we have here on the committee. I see that you have an extensive list of community outreach programs that the CBD are a part of. One of them that really interests me was the fact that you mentioned that you guys donate bikes. Is there a way that people can contribute to the bike donation, or?
Yeah, so our Police Athletic League takes direct donations. If you wanted to make it specifically for bicycle, you could include maybe a little memo. You could email that. You could get it to me in care of me. I would give it to Lieutenant Hannigan, who is the director of PAL. We have a number of fundraisers every year that PAL promotes through a big golf tournament. And that's how they get the donations to be able to provide these bikes and other things to our community. So people can purchase a green, like on the golf, everybody purchases a tee. So for so much money, they get a sign on the tee box, and then their company or that individual gets represented as a donator, and that costs something to do that. That's another way. But you can just do a direct donation to PAL and say for bike purchase.
Okay. And the PAL organization is phenomenal with all that they contribute to Chelmsford, the $50,000, the scholarship of $10,000. So that is great news. Thank you. You mentioned that you speak with the churches about active threats and give them that training. Are there any other businesses that you give that training to?
Any business that asks. We've had private companies ask, and I have 2 lieutenants that are trained in that type of training, and we send them over. We've done town offices. We've done really anybody that reaches out and says they're interested in this, then we will accommodate that.
Great. Could you tell us more about that hotline that you created, 411?
Yeah, so it's called Tips 411, and if you want to do it, you have to go to the App Store, and when you download the app, there's one of the choices will be Chelmsford, and when you download it, you activate the app, and it's just a texting communication, and you can remain anonymous. And if we have further questions for that person, we can text back, "Hi, this is Lieutenant Smith. Where did you say that vehicle is right now?" And then you can stay anonymous and help us. We've had people reach out about suspicious activity. We've had people reach out with what they thought was a crime in progress, a possible recovered motor vehicle. We had somebody reach out on the crisis in Washington that they thought an individual that was involved in that was in our area, and they gave us this person's information, and then we in turn contacted the FBI. So I think it's a great program where if you don't want to give your name, you can still reach out with hopefully helpful information.
Okay. Thank you, Chief Spinney. We have reached the top of the hour and a couple minutes after, but we really appreciate you coming and speaking with us. We're hoping to continue this dialogue in the future. But we really appreciate you coming out, and you've answered our questions with great detail.
Let me just, no, I really appreciate the time. And let me say that when we get through the pandemic, I'd love to have you all come to the facility. I give you a tour of the station. We can do cruiser ride-alongs if you actually want to hop in with an officer. We have a...
The front seat, right?
Yeah. That's a good one. That's right. We also have a scenario trainer coming this summer, where that's where there's the movie screen, where the officers run through scenarios. And I'd like to invite you all. We'll make a special day just for you guys, with my instructors. So you can come down. You can put on some fake equipment. You can be involved with a real call and have to make split-second decisions, just like the officers do. And I think you'll find it very informative. So when that kind of starts to develop, I'll reach out. And I think even if the pandemic is still going, we can have a smaller group come and do this, because we're going to have it regardless. So I'd like to be able to do that. But at the very least, please come by. I'll give you a tour of the station, and we can definitely do cruiser ride-alongs as well.
Okay,
That's
thank
great.
you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Chief Spinney. We really do appreciate your time. And hopefully you found this helpful to kind of get to know us a little better as well. Ideally, we'd like to be able to have other conversations with you as well. So if you'd be interested, we'd certainly like to reach out and maybe in a few months kind of follow up with you. One of the other things I do want to mention quickly, I know we're at the kind of end of our time here, but if there's any information that you or your officers would like to get from us, if there's some things that we as a committee can do to continue to partner with the police department, we'd definitely be interested in talking about those things as well, especially now that you've got your diversity committee. There might be opportunities for us to help each other, and that at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. So again, thank you so much. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And please feel free to email me. Tricia, you guys all have my email. Any concerns, questions, comments, just want to reach out. You drive by, you see something, had a question about something, reach out. Be glad to just keep everybody in the loop.
Fantastic.
Okay.
Thank you again. Thank you
Thank you,
again.
Chief.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
At this point, I would like to move that the January 19th meeting of the Diversity, Racial Equity, and Inclusion Committee be adjourned. Can I get a second to that motion?
Second.
Oh, I should have got the first one. Okay, yeah, thank you.
Are we meeting next week?
Yes,
Yes. Okay.
yes, we are. Yes, we are meeting next week.
Great job, team.